The diagnosis came out of nowhere, blindsided the hell out of me. Life was good. Not extravagant, not exciting, but comfortably good. I was a senior accountant at Miller& Zois, a respected firm with a stable clientele. The work was predictable, but it paid the bills, and I wasn't one for taking risks. My condo wasn't huge, but it was comfortable. I was never wealthy, but I had enough. Most importantly, I had Laura. Beautiful, intelligent Laura. We'd been married for 5 years, and I still got butterflies every time she walked into a room. I loved our quiet evenings at home, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched some mindless sitcom. We talked about having kids, about buying a house in the suburbs. A perfectly ordinary, perfectly good life. I never take things for granted. There are so many that do not have that luxury. Or so I thought. The annual physical. A necessary evil, but nothing to worry about. Dr. Davies was a good guy, always thorough, always reassuring. Until he wasn't. He called me back into his office after the scans, his face grim. "Jason, I'm afraid I have some bad news," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "We found something on the scan, a tumor, in your brain." He went on to explain the details. Rare, aggressive, terminal. 6 months, maybe less. The words hit me like a physical blow, but oddly, I didn't feel anything. Numb, maybe. Detached. It was like I was watching a movie and the protagonist was someone else. "I'm sorry, Jason," Dr. Davies said, his eyes filled with pity. "I wish there was something more I could do." I just nodded, thanked him for his time, and walked out of the office, the death sentence echoing in my ears. I accepted the fact, however. I would take this with open arms. Laura was waiting for me at home, her face etched with worry. I told her the news, keeping my voice even, my expression neutral. She reacted as expected. Tears, sobs, clinging. "No, it can't be true," she cried, burying her face in my chest. "We'll fight this, Jason. We'll do everything we can." I held her close, stroking her hair, but something felt off. Her grief seemed performative, forced, like she was acting out a role. I dismissed the thought, attributing it to my own shock and anxiety. She was being a good wife, supporting me in my time of need. That is what she should be. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I dismissed it with a shrug. There was nothing that I could do. The days that followed were a blur of appointments, consultations, and paperwork. I started making arrangements for my funeral, choosing the music, writing the eulogy, selecting the casket. It was all so clinical. I organized my finances, updated my will, and made sure Laura would be taken care of after I was gone. The more I took care of, the more I realized what kind of opportunity I had. There was a clear plan. I was unnervingly organized, efficient, as if I had done this before. It was strange, this detachment, this almost acceptance. I've already been thinking about things as if I had died, almost as if that life had come before. As the weeks passed, Laura's behavior became increasingly erratic. She was constantly on her phone, whispering into the receiver, then quickly hanging up when I entered the room. She started going out more often, claiming she was running errands or visiting friends, but she always seemed vague about the details. When I asked her about it, she became defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. But her eyes betrayed her. She was hiding something. I knew it. The more that I saw what was up, I became concerned with what I saw. It appeared that my old friend Eric was coming back for more. I tried to spend our last moments together in meaningful ways, but Laura seemed distant, preoccupied. Our conversations were strained, our touches perfunctory. She seemed to be in my world. I knew what was coming and how to deal with her. I suggested a weekend getaway, a romantic dinner, a simple walk in the park, but she always had an excuse. Work, errands, a headache, anything to avoid spending time with me. I decided it was time for me to go on with my life. This was all a waste of time, and time was something that I did not have. I better take care of this issue soon. I saw her as a challenge, a quest to be completed, rather than a loved one. And deep down, A part of me relished the thought of turning the tables on her, of making her pay for her deceit. But first, I needed more information. Things were about to get interesting. The pieces were falling into place, albeit faster than I anticipated. Emma, bless her heart, wasn't exactly a master of deception. Careless, perhaps. Overconfident, definitely. The opportunity to confirm my suspicions arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, disguised as a mundane domestic scene. Laura was in the kitchen, attempting to bake some elaborate cake she'd found on Pinterest. Flour dusted her hair, clinging to her designer sweater, a comical juxtaposition of wealth and incompetence. I was helping, which mostly consisted of standing back and trying not to breathe in too much of the flour cloud. Her phone, a sleek, rose gold device, lay abandoned on the counter, vibrating silently. A new text message. I wouldn't normally snoop, of course. That was the old Daniel. This was about gathering intelligence, about verifying a hypothesis. The message preview flashed briefly. Eric, seeing you tomorrow? I can't wait any longer. My stomach churned, a cold, detached disgust replacing the anger I might have felt previously. This wasn't about emotion. It was about strategy. I memorized the sender's name and number, a simple exercise for someone with my analytical background. Laura, oblivious, turned around, a smear of frosting on her cheek. Could you grab me the vanilla extract, honey? She asked, her voice saccharine sweet. I retrieved the vanilla, handing it to her with a polite smile. Inside, my mind was already calculating, assessing, formulating a counter strategy. She had made her move. Now it was my turn. It was not longer about what was there. It was just her. I knew I had to keep calm so I wouldn't scare her off. As soon as that happened, there would be no way to figure out what was going on. That evening, after a dinner consisting primarily of burnt sugar and regret, I decided to test the waters, as they say. I needed to gauge Laura's commitment to the charade, to understand her motivations, to quantify her greed. It was time for a fun game with someone that I had nothing to lose with. We were in the living room, the fake fireplace casting a warm glow on the perfectly curated decor. I picked up the remote, pretending to browse through channels, but my attention was focused entirely on Laura. You know, I said casually, my voice deceptively light. I was just reviewing our financial plan today. Did you realize how much that life insurance policy is worth? It's substantial. I watched her carefully. She was focused on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. But I saw a flicker of movement in her eyes, a subtle tightening of her jaw. Jason, you shouldn't worry about things like that, she said, her tone dismissive. You're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. Of course, I replied, feigning agreement. But it's good to be prepared, right? It's good to know that you'll be taken care of, no matter what happens. I let the words hang in the air, watching her reaction. She'll come to her senses eventually. In the end, no one actually knows what to do, and the only thing left to do is start a brand new beginning. Sleep offered little respite. The nightmares, thankfully, were gone, replaced by a strange, almost detached clarity. But this time, the clarity offered a lot of insight. I was standing at a real chessboard, and I noticed a pattern that allowed the board to be destroyed and all that was to come, not be. But more often the dream offered me insight, which it did. I could see the way things should move. I just had to plan them out accordingly. Now, it was a waiting game. A plan will come together and nothing would ever be the same again. The insistent ringing of my cell phone sliced through the manufactured serenity of my morning. I'd been attempting a meditation exercise, downloaded from some app, but my mind was too restless, too focused on calculations and strategies to find any inner peace. It was as if I had a computer processing what was up next. I glanced at the caller ID. Dr. Davies. My heart, or what was left of it, skipped a beat. Had something gone wrong? Had the tumor suddenly accelerated its growth, defying the grim prognosis? I almost did not even care. I answered the phone, my voice carefully controlled, devoid of any emotion. It was a waste of space as it was. Dr. Davies? His voice was a frantic whisper, laced with a distinct tremor. He was clearly agitated, barely holding himself together. Jason, I need you to come in, right away as soon as possible. "What's wrong, doctor?" I asked, my tone sharpening, a hint of impatience creeping in. "Is there a problem with the test results? It would not be the first one. Has the timeline been shortened to a few months?" It's it's complicated, Jason," he stammered, his voice cracking. "There's been a mistake, a serious one, and I need to explain everything in person." "A mistake? What kind of mistake could be made?" "I need you to trust me, Jason," he continued, his voice pleading. "I need you to come in so I can fully reveal the truth. Right now." He would not answer the question. His heart rate was all over the place, he could just tell. "I'm busy, doctor. I have appointments, errands to run, arrangements to make." "What is the truth?" I asked, my voice turning colder and more serious than before. "Please tell me what is truly going on." "It can't wait," he insisted, his voice rising in panic. "It's about everything, Jason. About your diagnosis. About your future." I hesitated, my mind racing, weighing my options. I had a plan in motion, a strategy carefully calibrated to exploit Laura's weaknesses and expose her treachery. This might bring something bigger, but it also might be nothing. All I knew was that it was time to go to showtime. The sterile smell of the clinic, usually so innocuous, now felt suffocating, oppressive. I sat in Dr. Davies's office, the familiar surroundings now alien and unsettling. He sat opposite me, his face pale, his hands clasped tightly on the desk in front of him. His words were all gibberish, but I knew what was up. He started with a rambling, incoherent explanation about a faulty machine, a rare glitch, a statistical anomaly. He used technical jargon, medical terminology, and bureaucratic doublespeak, trying to obscure the simple, brutal truth. I cut him off, my voice sharp. It was also that there would be someone new to take care of now. "Just tell me the result, doctor," I interrupted, my voice flat. "The truth." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Jason, I'm so sorry to tell you. The results of the machine you were originally hooked up to were faulty. There is no issue and no cancer to even note at all." The words hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. I felt nothing, no joy, no relief, no gratitude, only a cold, calculating curiosity. He thought I would accept this, but there was still showtime. He went on to explain how my other tests had been conducted to see if I had anything wrong with me and what happened to do, but I did not have the cancer that I was supposedly dying from. To make up for the troubles I'd been going through, as well as almost getting people killed by him, he offered me money to shut it all up. And the tests. It was all a waste of time. I listened to his apologies, his explanations, his desperate attempts to mitigate the damage, all without expression, my mind racing. I had to reassess, recalibrate, and formulate a new plan. This changes so much. This isn't a reprieve, it's an opportunity. An unexpected variable that could be exploited. It felt like a video game when you're just throwing all these cards in a match for things to work. As I left the clinic, the sunlight seemed harsher, the city noises more cacophonous. I was no longer a man with nothing to lose, facing imminent death. I was a man with a second chance, a clean slate, a chance to rewrite my future. And it all just goes to show there is more that I need to do. I am a brand new man, and I know the plan that is being put together is for nothing. The power to have all this in my hands is finally coming to me, and there is so much more to come. Showtime. I feigned excitement, a giddy anticipation that felt foreign on my tongue. I needed to sell this, to give Laura a reason to believe I was still the same naive fool she had married. I rushed home, my footsteps quickening with each block, rehearsing the words I would say, the smile I would wear. I was going to give her the performance of her life, to think I had believed all those years that she actually loved me. This was it, the moment of truth. Time to see if my suspicions were correct, if she was truly the cold, calculating bitch I now believed her to be. It was time to take control of my life and make it better. I opened the door, walked in quietly. The apartment was silent. Too silent. I found them in the bedroom, tangled in the sheets, their bodies glistening with sweat. The scene was almost comical, like a bad soap opera. But I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I simply observed, cataloging the details, gathering the information I needed. This is more than I would have ever wanted. The trash just simply put itself out. Disgust welled up inside me, a cold, acidic burn. But I suppressed it, focusing on the task at hand. Now the mission would happen with ease. I was about to learn that the easy road was not always the right one. I turned and walked away, heading towards the living room. I would not be part of whatever this joke was. Their voices followed me, hushed and urgent. I strained my ears, listening intently, gathering the last pieces of the puzzle. "We just need to wait a little longer," Laura whispered. "His funeral is next month, and the money will come in." "I still don't get why you're planning a whole funeral," Eric replied. "Just take the cash and leave." "I need to make it believable," Laura said, her voice cold and calculating. "The grieving widow routine sells. No one suspects anything." The pieces had all fallen into place. The betrayal was complete. The love was gone. Only a cold, hard plan remained. It was more than I would have ever expected. I walked out of the apartment, leaving Laura and Eric to their sordid little affair. I didn't say a word, didn't look back. There was no point in confronting them and wasting my breath on accusations and recriminations. The best revenge, as they say, is living well. I had an empire to make. This had now become a challenge to me, something that I needed to fulfill. It was time to plan. As I drove away, I started thinking about what was going on. I started to think about it in phases, like a corporation. There was some waste, it was time to cut, and get the business back on track. I also needed to think what to do with all this extra cash. There would be no emotional outburst, no dramatic showdown. Those were for fools. I drove straight to my lawyer's office, my mind already racing, formulating a plan. I needed to protect my assets to ensure that Laura wouldn't get a dime of my money. I needed to cover my tracks to make sure she wouldn't suspect a thing. I told myself I need a plan. It would be better to get to her quicker, before she started getting the upper hand. As I sat in my lawyer's office, listening to him explain the legal complexities of my situation, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. I realized I'd been given a second chance, a chance to reinvent myself, to escape the mundane, predictable life I'd been living, to learn the skills that would enable me to crush her. I was the phoenix. I had burnt and been reborn. Now it was time to rise from the ashes, stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than ever before. It was time to stop what I was doing and get to work. It was time to disappear, completely, utterly, irrevocably. I approached this with the same meticulous planning I used to audit a Fortune 500 company. No loose ends, no room for error. I needed to create a scenario that was both tragic and believable. A perfect storm of circumstance that would convince everyone, including Laura, that I was gone for good. I studied accident reports, insurance fraud cases, and even old episodes of CSI looking for inspiration. I wanted something dramatic, something unforgettable. And it all started to come into focus. There needed to be high drama and a set end to be a success. Eric, predictably, was a weak link. He was easily swayed by the promise of money, his loyalty as thin as his hairline. It did not take me long to realize what a nothing part of the plan he was, and how little the plan needed him to work. I contacted him, offering a substantial sum in exchange for information. I wanted to know everything about Laura, her habits, her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities. He caved almost immediately. He was a nobody and not important to the plan. He told me about a secret rendezvous Laura had planned, a clandestine meeting with a lawyer to discuss the life insurance policy. It was all I needed. The cliffside, a dark, winding road, a rented car, rigged with explosives. It was simple, elegant, and guaranteed to leave no trace. This was how it would end. As the car plunged into the ravine, engulfed in flames, I watched from a safe distance, a ghost in the night. There was a certain beauty to it, a sense of finality, a sense that something was right. It was time. I needed to make her pay, because what she had done could not simply be accepted. With all that set, everything was in place. Now I was a shadow, a phantom. I watched Laura from afar, studying her every move, analyzing her reactions. I wanted to see how she would grieve, how she would react to my death. As soon as I could, I knew that things would get interesting. She put on a convincing show, weeping at the funeral, accepting condolences with a sorrowful expression. But I saw through her facade. I saw the flicker of relief in her eyes, the subtle hint of satisfaction in her smile. The truth was out, I thought. It was the start of showtime. I now need to find all the right things to do. It was time to plant the seeds of doubt, to create an atmosphere of unease and paranoia. I sent her anonymous messages, subtle hints that I was still watching, that I knew her secrets. I needed to do what it was worth to do. I used my knowledge of her fears and insecurities to torment her, to make her question her sanity. The money had made a lot of difference. There was a lot less that I would have been able to do without it, because I did not have the power at the beginning. The old Jason Carter was gone. He was weak, naive, and easily manipulated. I did not want it to end there, but that was what had happened. The new Jason was different. He was cunning, resourceful, and ruthless. He was driven by a single purpose: to make Laura pay for her betrayal. I had the money, the knowledge, and the skills. Now it was time to use them. Time for a new plan, a new life, and a new approach to those who threatened my happiness. Time for someone who was better. The alimony was burning a hole in my pocket, but I knew I couldn't just blow it all on frivolous pleasures. I needed to invest, to build an empire, to create a platform from which I could launch my attack on Laura and Eric. It was time to get things started. Using some of my old contacts at Miller and Zoy's, I began to investigate new business deals and what would be most beneficial to me. I want to take all these suckers for everything they are worth. They better be ready. Eric, predictably, was suspicious. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Jason's death hadn't been as accidental as it seemed. A ghost cannot have a company. He saw the news articles about my growing company, my increasingly successful business ventures, and a sense of unease crept into his mind. This is all coming together. All I have to do is start to tug the thread. He confided his suspicions to Laura, but she dismissed them as paranoia. "You're just being ridiculous, Eric," she said, rolling her eyes. "Jason is dead. Get over it." But Eric couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone was playing him. The gears are all turning. As I read Eric's frantic emails to Laura, detailing his fears and anxieties, a smile crept across my face. It felt like a symphony was playing out just for me. He had no idea who I was, what I was planning, or how close I was to destroying his life. He was dancing to my tune, completely oblivious to the fact that he was about to fall off a cliff. What was to come would be great, but I had to be patient. I had to let the plan unfold, step by step, until it was too late for them to escape. Almost the perfect plan. The information I had gleaned from my sources and Eric himself was devastating. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. Eric was a walking crime spree, and I had all the evidence I needed to bring him down. I leaked the information to the authorities, anonymously, of course. Within weeks, Eric's business was under investigation. His assets were frozen, and his reputation was in tatters. All I had to do was simply hit a button. He was desperate, terrified, and completely alone, and it was all because he had crossed me. In the end, it was a lesson that he would learn. All he had to do was to simply be better. With Eric neutralized, it was time to turn my attention to Laura. She, of course, was also a piece of garbage. It was about time that I took out the trash. I knew I couldn't attack her directly. She was too powerful, too well-connected. I had to find a way to undermine her, to expose her true nature, to make her pay for her betrayal. She was not just cheating, but she had been planning to use his life insurance money to start over with Eric, once Jason was out of the way. Now I would just need to play it out. I began to spread rumors about her, whispering about her shady business dealings, her ruthless ambition, and her affair with Eric. I used my wealth and influence to manipulate the media, to paint her in a negative light. I wanted to make her doubt everything she ever knew, question her very sanity. The walls were closing in on her. It was just a matter of time before she snapped. And when she did, I would be there to watch her fall. It was almost like a masterpiece was being made. I cannot wait to see what is coming next and how I can help it flourish. It was time to move beyond subtle hints and veiled threats. I needed to get closer to Laura, to infiltrate her life, to become a constant presence in her peripheral vision. A ghost, both familiar and terrifying. I used my newfound wealth to purchase a condo in her building, a modest unit on the floor above hers. I accidentally bumped into her at the gym, the grocery store, the coffee shop. Each encounter was brief, casual, and seemingly coincidental. "Oh, Jason," she'd say, her voice laced with a mixture of surprise and unease. "What a small world." I'd just smile, offer a polite greeting, and move on, leaving her to wonder if it really was just a coincidence. Did I have the intention to start haunting her? She could never be certain. I began to escalate the psychological pressure, preying on her deepest fears and insecurities. I sent her flowers with cryptic messages, left anonymous notes on her car, and even hired a private investigator to follow her, documenting her every move. She became increasingly paranoid, convinced that she was being watched, that someone was after her. She started jumping at shadows, questioning her own sanity. She could not ever be sure, and it would bring the building down on her. The time for subtlety was coming to an end. It was time to unleash the full force of my plan, to expose Laura for the manipulative, greedy woman she was. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, piecing together a damning portrait of her affair with Eric, her financial improprieties, and her attempts to defraud the insurance company. The stage was set. The players were in place. It was time for the final act. With Eric facing criminal charges and financial ruin, he was no longer a factor. He had served his purpose as a pawn in my game, and now he was expendable. I cut off all contact with him, leaving him to wallow in his own misery. He was nothing more than a tool for me. I used him. Now I will leave him. It was no longer part of the plan. It was time to reclaim what Laura had stolen from me, my dignity, my peace of mind, and my future. But most importantly, it was time to take back the control of my life. I began to use my financial knowledge and my newfound wealth to undermine her business, to sabotage her deals, and to tarnish her reputation. I exploited her weaknesses, exposed her vulnerabilities, and turned her own tactics against her. I needed to destroy what she built so well, to give her a slice of humble pie. The satisfaction would be all that more worth it when that time came. Laura was crumbling, her world collapsing around her. She was lost, confused, and terrified, and I was just getting started. The plan was progressing faster than I had anticipated, and I needed to adapt, to refine my strategy, to ensure that nothing could derail my ultimate goal. The pieces were falling into place for something special, for a masterpiece. It was time to unleash the final blow. I just needed to make it worth something. The knock was soft, almost hesitant, but it sent a jolt of adrenaline through Laura's veins. She knew who it was. She had felt his presence, his eyes on her, for weeks now. The paranoia had been building, slowly but surely, until it was almost unbearable. I have been here before, and will soon again. She crept towards the door, her heart pounding in her chest, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. She had changed the locks multiple times, installed security cameras, and even hired a private investigator to protect herself. She was all that she had left. But still, I always come back. Taking a deep breath, she threw open the door, ready to confront her tormentor, to demand answers, to beg for mercy. It was all that was left for her to do, or so she thought. Standing in the doorway was Jason. But it wasn't the Jason she remembered, the naive, trusting man she had betrayed. This Jason was different, colder, harder, more dangerous. His eyes were devoid of emotion, his face a mask of icy calm. He didn't say a word, didn't make a move. He just stood there, staring at her, his presence filling the doorway with an unspoken threat. Or so, that is what it would feel to her. Now let me in so I can end it now. She had built a house of cards so high, and it was coming tumbling down on her. She recoiled in horror, her mind racing, trying to reconcile the man before her with the ghost that had been haunting her. Was this the end? Would he finally snap? Would he unleash the rage that had been simmering beneath the surface? "Hello, Laura," I said, my voice barely a whisper, devoid of any warmth or emotion. "It's been a while?" Her face drained of color. She was starting to suspect what I would be like and what I would need from her. "I'm not here for revenge, Laura," I said, my voice still flat and emotionless. "I'm here for justice." "What do you want, Jason?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. I stepped into the apartment, my eyes scanning the room, cataloging the details. It was time to end this game, to reveal the truth, to show Laura the consequences of her actions. I walked in and made myself at home. It was going to be a long night, but it would all be worth it when it all hit the fan. It was showtime. The weight had lifted, the game was over, the debts were paid, and Laura was no longer a concern. The constant planning, the need for deception, the simmering anger, it was all gone. I found myself reborn again with every day, a fresh start. The divorce certificate was more than just a legal document. It was a symbol of my liberation, a testament to my resilience, and a license to pursue my own happiness. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest, something that I was not expecting. I took a deep breath of that new, free air. It was time to begin. So it is time to take all the money from the ex-wife and run. I invested wisely, building my business into a thriving enterprise. I took calculated risks, exploited opportunities, and never looked back. The money that I'd stolen was all going to fuel my business, but I found that I knew what to do, and I would excel at it. I surrounded myself with people who were honest, trustworthy, and genuinely supportive. I learned to trust again, to open myself up to new experiences, and to embrace the possibilities that life had to offer. And with that, I was set for life. This was more than just revenge. This was a new lease on life, a chance to make something meaningful, something lasting. And I was determined to seize it with both hands. I was free, I was ready, and I was just getting started. This, however, would only be the beginning of another great series of issues to tackle. And with every day, the goal was to be better. The new life was coming, and it was so that I would build myself up.